Chapter 2195. When Mu Lingbing saw Mu Jinsei's unyielding attitude, she quickly told her everything that had happened. However, Mu Jinsei clearly didn't believe her. She had personally experienced everything that had happened. It was Situ Yen who had clearly told her that he wouldn't be with her and that the person who would be with him was Usiqing. Even though several decades had passed, she still remembered this scene clearly. Had Situ Yen changed his story in order to give Mu Lingbing a good impression of him? However, she was still alive and she remembered everything clearly. She was such a proud woman. After she had given Situ Yen her chastity, she had been waiting for him to make a promise to her. However, she had never thought that Situ Yen would be such a heartless man. The heavens had played a huge joke on her. In just one night, Situ Yen and Usiqing were together. It was as if, from the start, Situ Yen had never been true to her. He had only treated her as a plaything and had casually tossed her aside. She had wanted him to stay and give her an explanation, but he hadn't even given her the chance. He had swiftly turned around and led Usiqing away like a victor. He had ruthlessly trampled her pride under his feet and shattered it all over the floor. Mu Jinsei pushed Mu Lingbing out of the room. She really didn't want to have anything to do with that man. It would only make her feel that she had been a joke. However, just as Mu Lingbing was about to leave the room, she said something. At that time, Situ Yen thought that the person that night was Usiqing. Usiqing had drugged him and caused Situ Yen to misunderstand. Mu Lingbing looked at the tightly shut doors of the bedchamber, a look of helplessness on her face. The grudge from back then was too deep and it wasn't going to be easy to resolve it now. It looked like this matter wouldn't be resolved in a short period of time. She could only let Situ Yen slowly explain. After all, Situ Yen had caused Mu Jinsei so much pain for so many years. Situ Yen would definitely spend a lot of time before he could open Mu Jinsei's heart. She believed that Situ Yen had already made preparations for this. Mu Lingbing tried a few times, but when she saw that Mu Jinsei didn't show any signs of opening the door, she finally left. However, Mu Lingbing didn't know how much shock her last words had brought to Mu Jinsei. Mu Jinsei had never thought of such a possibility. That night, Situ Yen had indeed acted very strangely. If all of this was Usiqing's trap, then Mu Jinsei's body, which was leaning against the door, couldn't help but slide to the ground. If this was all a misunderstanding, then she couldn't imagine such an outcome, nor could she believe that all of this was real. 3 days later, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly woke up. Di Beichen had been guarding by Bailey Hongzhuang's side the whole time. When he saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had woken up, he couldn't help but have a look of joy on his face. "Wife, you're awake." Di Beichen hurriedly poured a glass of water and brought it to Bailey Hongzhuang's lips. Bailey Hongzhuang indeed felt thirsty. She only felt better after drinking the entire glass of water. "Di Beichen, how long have I been unconscious?" "You've been unconscious for 10 days. Di Beichen's heart ached. Chapter 2196. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was concerned about Mu Jin's condition the moment she woke up, Di Beichen's heart ached even more. "Don't worry, grandmother's condition is very good. She has already woken up and the antidote you made is very effective." Hearing Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang felt relieved. Previously, she had only confirmed that the antidote had a certain effect, but she didn't know what happened after that. "That's good." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Grandmother was finally fine. As long as she confirmed that the antidote was effective, she was confident that she could completely remove the goo poison from her grandmother's body. Previously, she didn't know that it was a goo poison, which was why she spent so much time. Now that she had a better understanding of the goo poison, it wouldn't be difficult to get rid of it. "Wife, how do you feel? Is there any part of your body that doesn't feel well?" After Di Beichen asked, the 3 beasts came over. "Master, don't think about anything else. The most important thing is your body." Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. "Don't worry, I'm just exhausted. It won't affect me much." As a doctor herself, she understood her own condition very well. Long before she had fainted, she had already understood her own body's condition. It was because she understood her own body that she decided to give it a try. "Master, Dr. Su said that doing this will harm your body and leave behind repercussions in the future." Xiao He said seriously. "Every time something happens to someone else, Master would always do her best. But how could she not take good care of her own body? Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang was stunned for a moment before she understood. I won't let my body have any repercussions. Don't worry. This kind of deficit did have a certain effect. After all, there would always be problems when the body's energy was completely depleted. However, she had a way to adjust to this situation, so she didn't need to worry. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't being perfunctory, Bewitching and the three beasts were relieved. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were not comparable to ordinary doctors. Master, is Yu Siqing's poison technique that powerful? White Lion could not help but ask. In the past, Yu Siqing had made so many poisons, and Master had been able to neutralize them all in a short period of time. However, this time, Master was exhausted to such an extent that he could only neutralize it. It could be seen that Yu Siqing was powerful. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. This goo poison was not controlled by Yu Siqing. She must have obtained this goo worm by chance. If I'm not wrong, she should only have one goo, and she chose to put it on her grandmother. From the previous confrontation, Bailey Hongzhuang already had a direct understanding of Yu Siqing's poison skills. The poison that Yu Siqing had concocted had nothing to do with goo poison. It was because of this that she had never thought of goo poison. If Yu Siqing was very familiar with goo poison, then the poison she concocted would not be like this. I see. The three beasts finally understood. She had used the most vicious goo poison on her grandmother. How abominable! Next time, I will prepare an even bigger gift for her. Chapter 2197. When they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang had regained consciousness, Mu Lingbing and the others all ran over in joy. To everyone, the sky had cleared up after the storm. Bailey Hongzhuang and Mu Jin's were both safe and sound. This was the best news. After Bailey Hongzhuang had regained consciousness, her body had quickly recovered. Dr. Su was extremely shocked when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's speedy recovery. When he found out about Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills, he was even more astonished. To possess such medical skills at such a young age, she was truly worthy of being called a genius doctor. Mother, has maternal grandmother been shutting herself in her bedchamber all this time? After Bailey Hongzhuang learned about Mu Jin's situation, she couldn't help but frown. As early as before, they had already expected that once Situ Yen appeared in front of Mu Jin's would inevitably lose control of her emotions. Initially, they had planned to completely cure Mu Jin's before Situ Yen went to see Mu Jin's. At least this way, they would be able to preserve Mu Jin's self-esteem and pride. However, none of them had expected that Mu Jin's would be able to see Situ Yen first. This made the situation even more difficult to handle. The way I see it, the knot in your maternal grandmother's heart isn't something that can be easily untied. It's a long road ahead. Mu Lingbing sighed. She had been telling Mu Jin's about what had happened in the past every day, and she had already explained everything that needed to be explained. She believed that Mu Jin's would have heard everything she had said from within the bedchamber. However, Mu Jin-se did not respond from the start to the end, so there was nothing she could do. Since maternal grandmother can't accept it, we don't need to be anxious. Bailey Hongzhuang was very calm. She believed that maternal grandmother's thoughts would gradually change after finding out about this. However, she had held a grudge for too many years and it would take some time for her to let go. Let's not talk about this with maternal grandmother for now. Let me get rid of the goo poison in maternal grandmother's body and restore her looks. I believe that everything will slowly get better. Mu Lingbing nodded. She couldn't help but grab Bailey Hongzhuang's hand, her eyes filled with anticipation. Yixuan, can you really restore your grandmother's appearance? As long as the goo poison is removed and I clear out the poison in her body one by one, grandmother will definitely be able to recover her looks. Bailey Hongzhuang's face rippled with an elegant and confident smile. She had already conquered this goo poison. Completely eliminating it was absolutely not a problem. That's great. Over the next few days, Bailey Hongzhuang helped Mu Jin's recover her appearance. At first, Mu Jin-se didn't believe that her appearance could be restored, but when she saw the charred black on her body gradually dissipating and her skin slowly recovering, she had no choice but to believe it. This time, Bailey Hongzhuang surprised her even more and filled her with hope. She thought that she would have to live like this for the rest of her life, but now she had the chance to see the light of day again. This was simply her dream. 7 days later, when Mu Jinsei walked out into the sunlight again, Mu Lingbing and the rest were shocked. This was because the Mu Jinsei in front of him was still that elegant and charming woman from back then. Compared to her elegant and refined appearance in the past, the passage of time had caused her to become more elegant and tolerant. Chapter 2198. When Gu Jinghe saw Mu Jinse in this state, her tears couldn't help flowing. She thought she would never see Mu Jinse again in this lifetime. She didn't expect Mu Jinse to be able to return to her original state. When Mu Jinse saw Gu Jinghe, her eyes were also filled with tears. After she left Tiangang sect, she and Gu Jinghe were like sisters. All these years, it was Gu Jinghe who had helped her. However, after she was disfigured, she didn't want Gu Jinghe to see her like this, so she hid. Palace Master? Gu Jinghe choked with sobs. Jinghe, the two sisters hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years. At this moment, they were both speechless. Mu Lingbing covered her mouth with her hand, afraid she would cry out loud. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had promised that she would be able to restore Mu Jinse to her original state, when this scene really appeared in front of her, her heart was filled with unspeakable shock. She really recovered? Lan Yunxiao was also in disbelief. Lan Yunxiao also found it hard to believe. He was very clear on what Mu Jinse looked like before, but Bailey Hongzhuang actually had a way to restore her. She was really too powerful. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was standing next to Mu Jinse, with a face full of smiles. She had done it. She had turned the rotten into the miraculous, turning the impossible into the possible. A family reunion. She had really done it. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. There was no need for words. Now, they only needed Situ Yen and Mu Jinse's relationship to improve. Then, they would truly have a family reunion. They could embark on another journey. In the distance, Situ Yen secretly watched Mu Jinse recover her original appearance. His heart was filled with uncontrollable excitement. However, even now Mu Jinse was still unwilling to see him, so he could only hide in the distance and quietly watch. No matter what, as long as he saw Mu Jinse recover, he was already very happy. As for what he owed Mu Jinse in the past, he was willing to use his entire life to repay it. He believed that there would be a day when Mu Jinse would accept him. Even if Mu Jinse didn't accept him, as long as he had the chance to treat Mu Jinse well, that was his happiness. After Mu Jinsei's body recovered, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others discussed and decided to return to Tiangang sect. After all, they had left Tiangang sect for a long time. Although the elders and hall masters had been taking care of Tiangang sect, it was not appropriate for them to never go back. There were always some things that needed someone to oversee the sect. When Mu Jinsei found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were preparing to leave, she was also very surprised. You want to return to Tiangang sect? Why don't you just stay in the Sun Moon Palace? That way, your grandmother can take care of you. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Grandma, I will come to see you often. Beichen is the young master of Tiangang sect. After leaving the sect for so long, I have to go back and have a look. Hearing this, Mu Jinsei unhappily said, You guys stay behind and let that old fellow leave. He is the sect master of Tiangang sect. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but snicker. Grandfather still has the most important thing in his life to do. We can't let grandfather delay this important matter, so we can only help. These days, Situ Yen had completely exhausted Mu Jinse. Chapter 2199. After seeing Situ Yan's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang also understood who Di Beichen had taken after when he pursued her. However, Bailey Hongzhuang naturally wouldn't say this out loud. Previously, Mu Jinse had tried to chase Situ Yen out of Sun Moon Palace. However, Great Elder Gu Jinghe had become an accomplice after learning of the situation. Every time Situ Yen was chased out, Gu Jinghe would let him in again. Thus, Mu Jinse's attempts to chase him out were completely useless. In the end, Mu Jinse was too lazy to say anything. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest saw Situ Yen and Mu Jinse's game of cat and mouse, they found it extremely funny. However, The two elders had already wasted their entire lives. Now that there was a chance for them to reconcile, they naturally thought of ways to help. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mu Jin's expression was awkward and unnatural. She was already so old, yet she was still being laughed at by her granddaughter and grandson-in-law. She was truly embarrassed. Grandmother, grandfather already knows his wrongs. If possible, please forgive him. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was full of smiles. They could feel that Mu Jin's attitude was gradually changing. As long as a few more days passed, they believed that everything would change. Mu Jin didn't reply to Bailey Hongzhuang's words and said, "Then be careful on the road. Come to Sun Moon Palace when you have time." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "Grandmother, we will definitely come back often. Yixuan, you and Beichen have to take good care of yourselves. We will also return in a few days." Mu Lingbing smiled. Mu Lingbing had grown up in Sun Moon Palace since she was young. Now that she was staying in Sun Moon Palace, she felt more at ease. Moreover, Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao didn't know how to arrange their identities after they went to Tiangang sect, so it was better for them to stay in Sun Moon Palace. The poison in their bodies had already been purged, but their cultivation had decreased greatly. Sun Moon Palace was rich in origin energy, so they had to stay here and cultivate properly, striving to recover their strength as soon as possible. Only after they recovered their strength could they return to the Lan family. "Father, mother, will be leaving first." Bailey Hongzhuang was full of smiles. This kind of separation was not really a separation for them at all. She believed that the next time they met, they would all be better. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen left the Tiangang sect. The incident with the medicine sect had caused the Tiangang sect to become the focus of attention of all forces. This time, they had been away for such a long time. Presumably, there were many things that needed to be dealt with in the sect. Obviously, it was impossible for Situ Yen to return to Tiangang sect in a short time, so this heavy responsibility was completely handed over to Di Beichen. According to Situ Yan's words, Di Beichen was fully qualified to be the sect master of Tiangang sect. As long as he reconciled with Mu Jin, he would stay in Sun Moon Palace. He didn't intend to care about the matters of Tiangang sect. Regarding this, Di Beichen only felt helpless. However, Master had been busy for so many years. Now, he could indeed enjoy his life. Since he was young, he had hoped that Master would be able to fulfill his wishes and enjoy his old age happily. Now that Master had found what he wanted, he naturally wouldn't obstruct Master. This time, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen left with smiles on their faces. During this time, they had made great progress. The next time they came to Sun Moon Palace, they wouldn't be stopped outside the mountain. Chapter 2200. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen returned to Tiangang sect in high spirits. Ever since her grandmother had recovered from her injuries, Bailey Hongzhuang could finally relax. She had never felt so relaxed before. In the past, too many things had piled up in her heart. She was worried that she would not be able to save her parents in time and worried that her grandmother was no longer in this world. Fortunately, the heavens were not so cruel to them and everything had changed for the better. If Yu Siqing knew that she had allowed Mu Jin to enjoy years of torture in exchange for giving them a chance to reunite as a family, Yu Siqing's expression would be even more sinister. However, before Bailey Hongzhuang began her revenge, she would not let Yu Siqing know about this. Previously, when she had removed the child worm from Mu Jin's body, Bailey Hongzhuang had not killed the child worm but had kept it. If there was a chance, the child worm would be very useful in the future. "Wife, guess when Master will be able to reconcile with you and grandmother?" Di Beichen was clearly in a good mood. Along the way, he would occasionally joke with Bailey Hongzhuang. The knot in grandmother's heart is very deep. Although she now knows the origin of everything, based on grandmother's character, she will not be able to accept it in a short period of time. Her delicate and beautiful face was filled with a confident smile. Bailey Hongzhuang understood that Mu Jin was a proud person. Even if Mu Jin's hatred towards Si Tuyen had been completely erased, it would not be easy for her to put down her pride and accept Si Tuyen. However, the only thing she could be sure of was the final outcome. They would be together in the end. Master's abilities are not bad. I feel that this day will not be too far away. Bewitching was full of smiles. His already handsome face was now filled with warmth and brightness, like the resplendent sunlight dazzling people's eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang turned her head to look at Bewitching beside her. She only felt that the sunlight and Bewitching's smile contrasted together, warming her heart. Wife, after we return to Tiangang sect, the competition between the 4 halls will begin. Bewitching restrained his smile, and his handsome face was full of serious color. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. She had previously heard that there would be a competition between the 4 palaces, but she was not clear on the exact time of the competition. Is this competition very important? Why do you look so serious? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Bewitching nodded. This competition is indeed very important. As soon as he said that, Bailey Hongzhuang's expression turned serious. Since Bewitching said so bluntly that this competition was very important, then it must be very important. The competition between the 4 halls is only an internal competition within Tiangang sect and is not considered important. However, this competition was related to another matter. Every 3 years, the major sects and aristocratic families would jointly hold a competition. As long as one could obtain an outstanding performance in this competition, they would be rewarded handsomely. These rewards were jointly provided by the various sects and aristocratic families, so the richness of the rewards could be imagined. To the disciples, the most important thing was naturally the rewards. However, to the various powers, the most important thing was the ranking. This competition can reflect the strength of the various sects to a certain extent. If one's ranking was low, it would be a loss of face. Chapter 2201. To you, as long as you participate in this competition, you will be able to compete with Lan Qingyan on the same platform. Bewitching's words exploded in Bailey Hongzhuang's heart. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze suddenly froze and a complicated expression emerged on her charming face. Lan Qingyan. This name had long been engraved in her heart. This woman had snatched everything from her, and now she was shamelessly enjoying something that did not belong to her. She had always wanted to compete with Lan Qingyan, and now, this opportunity had appeared in front of her. All the major sects and aristocratic families will place their most outstanding successors and youths in this competition. Lan Qingyan, as the most famous person in the Lan family, will definitely participate. This point there was no need to doubt. So, I have to obtain a good enough result in this 4 palaces exchange competition before I can participate in this competition? Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood the crux of this. If this was really the case, then this competition between the 4 palaces, she was determined to win. Bewitching nodded. That's right. When will the competition between the 4 palaces be held? 3 months later. Then what about that competition? 6 months later, I will also participate. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly. These days, she had been delving into the art of medicine and poison and had delayed her cultivation. However, after such a high level of deficit, her mental strength had increased by quite a bit compared to before. There are still 3 months' time. I will go into closed-door cultivation. That competition, I will definitely participate. She would not miss this opportunity. Lan Qingyan, there's still half a year's time before we can meet again. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a mocking arc. They had exchanged lives for close to 20 years, and now it was time to exchange it back. Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes that flashed with a resolute light. He understood that in these 3 months' time, Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely cultivate bitterly. He was also looking forward to the wonderful expression on Lan Qingyan's face when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang. When Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang returned to Tiangang sect together, Tiangang sect could not help but be in an uproar. However, compared to the time when everyone doubted Bailey Hongzhuang, the situation now was undoubtedly much better. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang turned the tide in the alchemist competition, proving her ability and redeeming everyone's honor, everyone's doubts towards Bailey Hongzhuang had lessened. No matter whether they accepted it or not, the young sect master and Bailey Hongzhuang were together. Moreover, the two of them looked as though their love was stronger than gold. It was totally not what they had guessed previously that they would part soon. Bewitching immediately went to the conference hall. He needed to understand the sect's situation during this period of time when they were not around. The 4 palace masters and the Pill Refinery Palace Master all went to the conference hall, along with the various elders. Since the young sect master had returned, they were bound to report everything. Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. She had not returned for a long time. Now that she had decided to go into closed-door cultivation, she had to be prepared for it. Luckily, the Chaos Ring had the existence of the desert world. Although it was only 3 months' time, she could extend it by a lot. Chapter 2202. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been a steady cultivator. Even though elixirs were very effective in raising one's strength, Bailey Hongzhuang did not consume much of them. Based on her current situation, there was still a large gap between her and Lan Qingyan's strength. Therefore, she wanted to raise her strength by 1 point. With her current foundation, it was not a problem for her to raise her strength from the 6th level of the Green Realm to the 7th level of the Green Realm by consuming elixirs. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang went into seclusion the moment she entered the house. She wanted to use this night to break through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. In order to be able to appear in front of the Lan family, in order to be able to compete with Lan Qingyan, she had waited for a long time. Now that the opportunity had finally arrived, she naturally wouldn't miss it. While Bailey Hongzhuang was in seclusion to break through to the 6th level of the Green Realm, Bewitching was listening to the elders and the palace master's report. Young Lord, the martial arts championship will begin in half a year. We have to prepare in advance and select some outstanding disciples to participate with you. The Azure Dragon Palace Master, Yan Kaiching, had a serious and dignified expression. The martial arts championship was a grand occasion in the entire Xingxian continent. As long as one could achieve good results in the martial arts championship, one would be truly famous. Tiangang sect's strength had never been weak. They could not perform badly in the martial arts championship. Bewitching nodded slightly. Same old rules. The 4 palaces competition will be held in 3 months to select outstanding disciples. The next 3 months will be a unified experience to raise one's strength. All the palace masters and elders can begin to inform the disciples of this news so that they can prepare early. Although Bewitching knew a lot about the martial arts championship, he had never participated in it. If his leg had not been injured previously, he would have competed in the previous martial arts championship. However, Tiangang sect was represented by someone else at that time. This time, as the young lord of Tiangang sect, he would personally lead the disciples to compete. He must achieve good results. Hearing Bewitching's arrangement, the palace masters and elders all nodded. It seemed that Bewitching had already thought of a way to deal with this matter without their reminder. Looks like the battle of the 4 palaces this time is going to be exceptionally exciting. Qin Ai's face was brimming with smiles. Usually, there were still many disciples who liked to preserve their strength during the competition of the 4 halls and did not display their full strength. However, the battle of the 4 palaces this time was related to the martial arts championship. He believed that no matter which disciple it was, they would not give up such an opportunity to become famous. All the disciples would definitely use their trump cards. The hall masters and elders all smiled and nodded after hearing this. Their Tiangang sect had many disciples and countless genius disciples. Once the fighting spirit of these disciples was aroused, it would absolutely be a fierce battle between dragons and tigers. Now they could start looking forward to it. Bewitching's eyes darkened. Just as Qin Ai had said, the competition between the 4 palaces this time would be unprecedentedly difficult. Bailey Hongzhuang came to Tiangang sect for only a short time, and during this period of time, she put her energy in other aspects. If she wanted to stand out in the battle of the 4 palaces, it would definitely not be an easy task. However, Bewitching was still full of confidence in Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 2203. When the news of the battle of the 4 palaces and the martial arts tournament spread in Tiangang sect, all the disciples were full of excitement and shock. Some disciples who did not know about the martial arts tournament even asked about it. After knowing the importance of the martial arts tournament, All the disciples could not help but be full of expectations. Such a good opportunity, every disciple had a chance. Of course, the premise was that their own strength was strong enough. Some disciples who did not cultivate with all their strength only felt regret after knowing about this. If they knew that the martial arts tournament was about to begin, they would have cultivated with all their strength. If they watched this opportunity slip away in front of their eyes, it was really unbearable. Similarly, some disciples who were extremely diligent on weekdays only felt that they had waited for so long and finally waited for a good opportunity. They had long been eager and could not hold back. Bailey Hongzhuang, who was cultivating in the house, did not know that the news had exploded in Tiangang sect. Until the next day, when the sky gradually brightened, Bailey Hongzhuang opened her eyes. As she thought, with the effect of the elixir, she successfully broke through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. Moreover, after breaking through to the 7th level of the Green Realm, she found that there was still a part of the elixir in her body. As she cultivated, this part of the elixir would be completely absorbed by her and her cultivation would be improved again. During this time, although Bailey Hongzhuang had put all her energy on her parents and grandmother, her cultivation still had a certain progress. Therefore, she was not far from breaking through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. With the elixir, it was even faster. When Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were preparing to go to the meditation field in the morning, they unexpectedly saw Bailey Hongzhuang coming out of the house. Their faces suddenly showed a strong surprise. "Hongzhuang, when did you come back?" Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. Since the end of the alchemist competition, they had not seen Hongzhuang and did not know when Hongzhuang came back. "I just came back yesterday." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "Hongzhuang, have you heard? The Battle of the Four Palaces this time concerns the Martial Arts Championship." Xia Jiqing quickly walked to the side of Bailey Hongzhuang. The news had only come out yesterday, and everyone was very concerned about it. There were many outstanding disciples in Tiangang sect, not to mention that the strength of those senior disciples was far stronger than them. In comparison, this batch of new disciples basically had no hope. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was not something an ordinary new disciple could compare to. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang worked hard, she might have a chance to participate. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "I've already heard. This time, whether it's the Battle of the Four Palaces or the Martial Arts Championship, it's a great opportunity for us. All of you must do your best." Even if he could not participate in the Martial Arts Championship, as long as he could perform well in the Battle of the Four Palaces and gain the attention of the Palace Master, it would be good enough. "We will, Hongzhuang, you have to work harder." Xia Jiqing smiled. "I will." Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were sharp. This time, she would definitely get a place in the Martial Arts Championship. Chapter 2204. "Hongzhuang, are you going to meditate now? Then let's go together," Bai Junyu said with a smile. Today's Bailey Hongzhuang was much busier than before. They could only choose not to ask, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang had a good life. "You go first, I'm going to find Bewitching," Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. Although the concentration of power in the meditation room was much richer than in other places, Bewitching's cultivation room was even richer. For her now, there was nothing more important than improving her strength, so she didn't have any time to waste. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also understood and immediately smiled and nodded. They all understood that Bailey Hongzhuang would never miss such an opportunity, and presumably now she would seize every second. When Bailey Hongzhuang came to Bewitching's palace, she found that there was no Bewitching in the palace, and then went directly into the cultivation room. Sure enough, Bailey Hongzhuang saw Bewitching in the cultivation room. "Wife, you are here." Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang coming, Bewitching's face quickly filled with a happy smile. Looking carefully, Bewitching suddenly found that Bailey Hongzhuang's aura had changed, and the smile in his eyes suddenly deepened. In one night, wife has broken through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. Yesterday, Bailey Hongzhuang told him that she was going back to retreat, and he didn't think much about it. He didn't expect that in just one night, Bailey Hongzhuang had successfully broken through. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly, There are many excellent disciples in the four temples. If I want to get a place, don't I have to work hard? Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know enough about the strength of these disciples, but after knowing the strength of Bewitching and Xiren, she knew how big the gap between them was. The strength of the disciples of Tiangang sect couldn't be compared with Bewitching, but some of the powerful cultivators wouldn't be much worse. In contrast, the pressure on her was really not small. She didn't know how strong Lan Qingyan was now, but if she guessed correctly, Lan Qingyan's cultivation was definitely not worse than Bewitching and Xiren. Because Lan Qingyan was a talented cultivator with the colorful pearl. The colorful pearl could help a cultivator save a lot of time during cultivation. Ever since she had the colorful pearl, Bailey Hongzhuang already deeply understood how big the gap was. Lan Qingyan already had it since she was young. After so many years, she saved a lot of time compared to others. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching chuckled, "Wife, your strength is also very strong. Let's seize the time to cultivate. Let's go to the desert world first." Bailey Hongzhuang had already thought of a cultivation method. They would cultivate in the desert world for 3 days, then meditate in the cultivation room to recover. In this way, not only would their battle strength be improved, the effect of cultivation after their spirit power was exhausted would also be better. Bewitching nodded slightly. He was also very interested in the desert world, especially those strange demonic beasts that he had never seen before. They always had different characteristics when fighting. The 3 beasts immediately came up. We also have to work hard. As contracted beasts, they were part of their master's strength. No matter if it was a competition or other times, they were allowed to appear. Chapter 2205. Although Lan Qingyan started cultivating much earlier than Master, it was impossible for Lan Qingyan to have 3 contracted beasts like Master. At least in this aspect, they had better conditions than Lan Qingyan. Therefore, they must display their strength and help Master completely defeat Lan Qingyan. In the following period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching entered the desert world to cultivate at night and meditated in the cultivation room to absorb elemental energy during the day. Regarding such high-intensity cultivation, whether it was Bewitching, Bailey Hongzhuang, or even the 3 beasts, none of them had any objections. Normally, they might be able to relax a little, but at such a critical moment, no one had the slightest thought of relaxing. At the same time, the benefits of such high-intensity cultivation were also extremely shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others encountered more and more powerful demonic beasts in the desert world. Their battle methods also became more and more varied. Every battle was thrilling. Because there was a big gap in strength between Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching, Bewitching often dealt with the most difficult ones while Bailey Hongzhuang dealt with the slightly weaker ones. The 3 beasts also went all out in this desert world. Xiao He and Xiao Bai's figures changed size at will and they became more and more proficient in using the yin-yang 8 trigrams formation. Previously, Xiao He and Xiao Bai also spent a lot of effort to cultivate the yin-yang 8 trigrams formation, but they didn't have much opportunity to test it on normal days. Ever since they had this desert world, they didn't have to worry about not having a place to test it. What they were most worried about was exhausting the elemental energy in their body and the demonic beasts attacking again. That was the worst. Bewitching also felt the benefits of this desert world. The demonic beasts here were endless, and the deeper they went, the stronger they were. He didn't have any suitable opponents when cultivating in Tiangang sect. In the past, Master would occasionally spar with him, but now there was no chance. If he didn't have this desert world, he could only leave Tiangang sect to find a place to cultivate. However, with this desert world, it was undoubtedly much more convenient. In the process of fighting in the desert world, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also found that these blood demon crystals were not harmful to Baisher. On the contrary, they could promote the growth of Baisher's cultivation base. The effect seemed to be stronger than the usual demon crystals. Usually, Bailey Hongzhuang had to spend a lot of effort just to prepare enough rations for Baisher. Now that they were here, Baisher's rations were completely solved, which was undoubtedly a good thing. In the process of consuming the blood demon crystal, Baisher's strength continued to rise. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching, but all the disciples of Tiangang Zong were working hard to cultivate, in order to amaze the world in 3 months and be famous in 6 months. As the young sect master of Tiangang sect, Bewitching was even more willing to part with these cultivation resources. The martial arts championship was a competition that every force attached great importance to. If they fell in the rankings in this martial arts championship, the reputation of the sect would be damaged. As the representative of Tiangang sect, Bewitching had to perform well in this martial arts championship. Therefore, when Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching retreated from the desert world, they used the cultivation resources while cultivating in the cultivation room. As a result, the speed at which his strength was increasing had increased by a few notches. Junyu, could it be that Hongzhuang has cultivated so much that she doesn't even remember the date of the Battle of the Four Palaces? Xia Zhiqing anxiously paced back and forth. Today was the day to confirm the number of disciples participating in the competition between the 4 temples. Although there were many disciples participating in the competition between the 4 palaces, not every disciple could participate. There were many disciples in Tiangang sect. If every disciple were to participate, then who knew how long this battle of the 4 palaces would have to last? If Bailey Hongzhuang didn't appear today, then she wouldn't be able to participate in the battle of the 4 palaces tomorrow. Bai Junyu obviously didn't expect such a situation to occur. Hongzhuang shouldn't have gone out to cultivate, right? Should we go to the young sect master's bedroom to find her? The young sect master hasn't appeared for a long time. Maybe she isn't in the sect. Chapter 2207. Listening to Xia Zhiqing's words, Bai Junyu's face also showed helplessness. Indeed, they were able to go to the young sect master's palace because Bailey Hongzhuang had led them. With their identity, it was impossible for them to set foot there. Even if Hongzhuang doesn't know, the young sect master should know. Bai Junyu couldn't understand. Such an important opportunity, Bailey Hongzhuang must not miss it. I think the palace master is also waiting for Hongzhuang, but if Hongzhuang doesn't appear, the palace master wants to give Hongzhuang a spot. I'm afraid it will only cause criticism. Xia Zhiqing's face showed a strong sense of helplessness. Usually, Hongzhuang would not be like this. What was going on this time? When Bailey Hongzhuang arrived at the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, she saw Xia Zhiqing and Bai Junyu anxiously waiting. Her face suddenly filled with a smile. Zhiqing, Junyu, what are you doing here? Suddenly hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, Xia Zhiqing and Bai Junyu were shocked. They only felt that this voice was like the sound of nature, and their eyes instantly turned to Bailey Hongzhuang. Hongzhuang, you're finally here. Xia Zhiqing quickly trotted to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Her delicate and beautiful face was full of anxiety. If you're a little later, I'm afraid there won't be a spot for the competition. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. What does this mean? Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Xia Zhiqing knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had no idea what was going on. Today is the day to determine the spots for tomorrow's competition between the 4 palaces. Only 20 disciples of our Vermilion Bird Palace Hall can participate. Just getting a spot for the competition between the 4 palaces is not an easy thing. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with surprise. She only knew that tomorrow's battle of the 4 palaces was very important, but she didn't know that there was a quota for the participants today. Bewitching didn't tell her about this either. In fact, Bewitching could not be blamed for this. This was because the palace lords were usually the ones to choose the quotas for the competition of the 4 palaces. With Bailey Hongzhuang's status, no matter what, Qin AI would always leave a quota for Bailey Hongzhuang. However, the battle of the 4 palaces this time was related to the battle of Zhuolu. Every disciple paid close attention to it. That was why there was such a thing as a selection. It was to make these disciples accept it wholeheartedly. Bewitching did not participate in the previous battle of Zhuolu, so he naturally did not know about it. What's the situation now? What should I do? Bailey Hongzhuang asked quickly. She had been in seclusion for so long in order to get a quota for the battle of the 4 palaces. If she didn't even have the qualifications to participate, wouldn't she be speechless? Hongzhuang, it is said that this time all disciples above the 5th level of the Green Realm can go in for the assessment. You must have already reached that level, so you should go in quickly. Xia Jiqing said quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that many disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall were waiting outside the stone room. Some of the disciples had entered the stone room for the assessment. Those who were not qualified to enter or had already finished the assessment were waiting outside. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Then I'll go in first. The next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly walked into the stone room. It was already late. If she didn't hurry up, she was afraid that she wouldn't have the opportunity to take the assessment. Chapter 2208. I thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was not going to participate in the competition of the 4 palaces. I didn't expect her to appear today. Although Bailey Hongzhuang is a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, she comes and goes without a trace. I haven't seen her many times in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang is the future wife of the young sect master. This matter is already set in stone. I think even the sect master has agreed. If I were Bailey Hongzhuang, then I would enjoy the resources of the sect. Why would I work so hard to participate in the competition of the 4 palaces? A group of female cultivators felt a strong sense of incomprehension towards Bailey Hongzhuang's behavior. The reason why they worked hard to cultivate was that they could only get sufficient resources after their strength was improved. They may also have a better life in the future. As for Bailey Hongzhuang, she was now a sparrow that had turned into a phoenix. There was no need for her to work so hard. What's more, if she didn't perform well in the competition of the 4 palaces, it would have a bad impact on her. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu listened to the thoughts of these female disciples and suddenly understood why these guys didn't have the opportunity to become a carp that jumped over the dragon's gate. Just this kind of thinking was already impossible. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching never had any dependent relationship between them. They were equal. After Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the stone room, she found that the stone room was unexpectedly spacious. There were several disciples lining up inside. After Qin Ai saw Bailey Hongzhuang appear, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. He was still worried that Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't appear today. If he forcibly left a spot for Bailey Hongzhuang, it would lead to criticism from the disciples. As the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall Master, even if the disciples criticized him, it wouldn't have any impact on him. However, after participating in the alchemist competition, Bailey Hongzhuang finally had a certain amount of fame. If she was criticized again because of this matter, it was tantamount to returning to the past. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Qin Ai's smile, she also bowed slightly. Every time she saw Qin Ai, she could feel Qin Ai's goodwill. In the process of waiting, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that the disciples in the queue all walked towards the Brotherhood statue behind Qin Ai after obtaining permission. It was as if, according to the performance of the cultivator, the apparatus would give a corresponding grade. It was divided into 4 levels: heaven, earth, black, and yellow. Among them, heaven was the strongest and yellow was the weakest. If the disciples' grade was only at the yellow grade, then they would definitely not be qualified. If it was the Xian rank, there might be a chance, but the chances were slim. If he reached the earth rank, the possibility of obtaining a spot would be very high. As for obtaining the heaven rank, that was definitely not a problem. Bailey Hongzhuang watched as one disciple after another came out of the apparatus. Most of the disciples were of the Xian grade, and occasionally there would be an earth grade. Once an earth rank disciple appeared, Qin Ai would record this disciple's name. It's really too difficult to obtain a spot. I don't know how this place determines the qualifications. Although my strength has reached the 5th level of the Green Realm, I don't think it's possible. There are so many disciples in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. There are only 20 spots in total. It's definitely extremely difficult to obtain a spot. Chapter 2209. Since you're just going through the motions, what are you doing here? What if there's a problem with the apparatus? Or what if my talent isn't tested? Wouldn't it be a waste? Besides, it's good to be recognized by the palace master. One of the disciples smiled. As soon as these words were spoken, many of the disciples present nodded in agreement. Many of them knew that they had no hope of passing the test. However, they still wanted to get lucky. Green Realm Level 5. This was a pretty good cultivation. If the palace master could remember them, it would be a good result. After waiting for the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, it was Bailey Hongzhuang's turn to go in for the test. Do your best to display your strength. Hold on for as long as you can. Qin Ai smiled at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed slightly. Thank you for your guidance, Palace Master. When the crowd saw Qin Ai's kind attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang, they were envious. This was the difference between them. So many disciples had participated in the test, but the Palace Master had never told any of them. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was able to receive the Palace Master's guidance the moment she arrived. Although everyone knew about this, they were still envious. Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the apparatus. The door of the apparatus was closed, and no one outside could see what was happening inside. However, when the cultivator left the apparatus, the top of the apparatus would display the cultivator's previous performance. This was the first time Bailey Hongzhuang had seen such an apparatus. She had no idea what kind of test she would face once she entered. However, since Palace Master Qin had reminded her to hold on for as long as she could, she would hold on for as long as she could. As Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the apparatus and the door closed, the apparatus attacked her rapidly. In an instant, it was as if countless hands had appeared in the apparatus and attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. Every fist was filled with powerful force. Once it landed on the cultivator's body, it would be unbearable. The range of this device was very small, so the cultivator's range was also very small. They could only passively receive these attacks. Bailey Hongzhuang's reaction speed was very fast. After seeing the attack coming, she quickly blocked it. Today, her shape-shifting technique has reached the completion stage. Her body was like the wind, ethereal and formless. Fulgurating transposition was a very high-level movement technique, and its ability to dodge was even more impressive. Therefore, even though the range of the device was very small, Bailey Hongzhuang's dodging ability was still extremely shocking. If the cultivators could see the situation in the apparatus, they would definitely be amazed by Bailey Hongzhuang's dodging ability. This was because they could only see a figure changing rapidly like the wind in the device. They could not see its real movements at all. Bailey Hongzhuang's current cultivation was no longer the same as before, and her combat ability had also improved greatly. If it were her in the past, she probably wouldn't have been able to hold on for long. As the time Bailey Hongzhuang spent inside increased, the number and strength of the punches increased. Chapter 22:10. After Bailey Hongzhuang entered the apparatus, the disciples who were waiting at the back all paid close attention to the situation of the apparatus. For an influential figure like Bailey Hongzhuang, her results had always attracted attention. I wonder how long Bailey Hongzhuang can last and what level she has reached? I only know that her alchemy skills are extremely powerful and she was the champion of the assessment competition. However, I have never seen her true abilities and have no idea at all. I feel that since Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy skills are so powerful, her cultivation shouldn't be that strong. As the disciples' voice faded, the disciples present all nodded their heads. Alchemists were not powerful enough, and this was something that everyone knew. This was because alchemists put all their energy into alchemy and would not spend any more time on cultivation. After hearing the disciples' thoughts, a smile appeared in the depths of Qin Ai's eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang was the granddaughter of the sect leader, and this was not something that could be explained by common sense. Being the champion of the assessment competition was enough to prove how powerful Bailey Hongzhuang was. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang came to Tiangang sect, she had always been elusive and he was not sure what level of cultivation Bailey Hongzhuang was at. However, he believed that Bailey Hongzhuang's abilities would not disappoint him. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect leader, who was a cultivation maniac, were together. Presumably, both of them were cultivation maniacs. As Bailey Hongzhuang stayed in the apparatus for a longer period of time, the disciples' expressions changed. Bailey Hongzhuang has been in there for a long time. Why hasn't she appeared until now? I don't know. Isn't this apparatus used to determine a cultivator's talent level based on the length of time they stay in there? Bailey Hongzhuang can actually stay in there for so long. Isn't this too strange? Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang has some special method to stay in there and we don't know about it? The Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples were confused. Before this, they had seen many cultivators take the test, but they had never seen a disciple who could stay in there for such a long period of time. The longer the time, the more shocked the disciples became. I remember, that disciple who had reached the earth rank had stayed in there for so long. He should have come out by now? A disciple could not help but ask. This time was a little too long. Perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang has really reached the earth rank. After all, the cultivation resources that she has are incomparable to ours. It's not strange for her to reach this level. Another disciple voiced his opinion. Come on the path of cultivation, other than the cultivator's own talent and hard work, resources also played a large role. That being said, the disciple still felt sour grapes when he spoke. When Qin Ai saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had not come out after such a long time, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. It looked like Bailey Hongzhuang had not disappointed him. To be able to stay in the apparatus for so long proved that Bailey Hongzhuang had reached the earth rank. This kind of ability was enough to take part in the competition of the 4 palaces. Although Qin Ai could not be certain whether Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to perform well in the competition of the 4 palaces. Chapter 22:11. Qin Ai's gaze landed on the apparatus. It was about time for Bailey Hongzhuang to come out. However, after waiting for a while, Qin Ai saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had yet to appear and his expression instantly became interesting. This time was a little too long. The time for Earth grade had already been reached. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to reach Heaven grade? When this thought surfaced in Qin Ai's mind, even he himself felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Heaven grade, such a grade was extremely rare to appear. When Qin Ai made such a guess, the expressions of the Tiangang sect disciples became even more interesting. They had never seen it for such a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang actually stayed for so long and still hasn't come out. She couldn't have been knocked unconscious inside, right? When a cultivator voiced out his conjecture, the other disciples were also stunned. Speaking of which, such a situation had happened before. The attacks within the apparatus had always been very powerful. If one was not careful and was hit in a vital point, it was very likely that one would faint. Once the cultivator who entered the apparatus fainted, the apparatus would stop attacking. Back then, there was a disciple who fainted forcefully. Everyone waited outside the apparatus for a long time, but there were no signs of her appearing. In the end, even the higher-ups were shocked. Everyone thought that a shocking genius had appeared in the sect. Who would have thought that the so-called genius was carried out in the end and had already fainted? It was really laughable. This story was very widespread in Tiangang sect. Later on, such a thing had also happened before. This is really hard to say. If Bailey Hongzhuang really fainted in the apparatus, it would be a big joke. Although from a certain point of view, the disciples did not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would faint in the apparatus. However, if Bailey Hongzhuang did not faint, then Bailey Hongzhuang's grade would be close to Heaven grade. Between these two possibilities, everyone obviously believed in the former more. This was because the latter possibility was simply too unbelievable. Palace Master, should we check on Bailey Hongzhuang's situation? The elder beside Qin Ai could not help but suggest. They were well aware of the power of this instrument. Bailey Hongzhuang was young, and she was also an alchemist. It was hard to believe that she could persist for so long. If Bailey Hongzhuang was really unconscious, they had to rescue Bailey Hongzhuang as soon as possible. Once Bailey Hongzhuang's vital parts were injured, it wouldn't be good for Bailey Hongzhuang for too long. Qin Ai frowned. He had never thought of such a possibility before. Now, as time passed, he was starting to worry. For so long, he had never understood Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, so he could not determine the result. In an instant, all the disciples' gazes landed on Qin Ai. They did not know what decision the palace master would make. Let's wait for a while. Qin Ai muttered. He believed in Bailey Hongzhuang's strength. If Bailey Hongzhuang was really still persevering, wouldn't they destroy Bailey Hongzhuang's results if they turned on the apparatus now? After hearing Qin Ai's decision, The disciples could not help but sigh. They did not expect the palace master to have such high hopes for Bailey Hongzhuang. It was really unexpected. Chapter 22:12. Time continued to pass. After waiting for a while, Qin AI noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang still had not emerged from the apparatus. His expression instantly turned into an ugly shade. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang's luck was really so bad that she had been struck in a vital spot by an attack from the apparatus and had fallen unconscious? This length of time had exceeded his expectations. Based on Bailey Hongzhuang's level of power, she should not have been able to hold on for such a long time. Palace Lord, let's open the door of the apparatus and take a look. The elder could not help but remind him. If Bailey Hongzhuang had really met with an accident in the apparatus, it would be a disaster. Hearing this, Qin AI thought for a moment before nodding his head. Bailey Hongzhuang's status was extremely noble. If she had met with any danger and was not treated in time, he would not have the face to face the sect master. Then Qin AI and the elder walked towards the apparatus. They had to ascertain that Bailey Hongzhuang was safe. When the cultivators who were watching from the sidelines saw Qin AI's actions, their eyes lit up. It seems that the palace lord also believes that something has happened to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang has definitely fainted in there. If this news were to spread, it would be a major piece of news. If Bailey Hongzhuang had really fainted, I'm afraid that she would not be able to obtain a place in the competition of the 4 palaces. Speaking of which, it would be rather embarrassing. Bailey Hongzhuang is a genius pill master. She should just focus on refining pills. There's no need for her to fight with us for such a small number of places in the competition. The disciples were delighted to see this. With one less competitor, their chances of obtaining a place in the competition would increase. This was undoubtedly the best outcome. Just as Qin AI and the elder were about to open the door to the apparatus, a voice suddenly rang out. Then, under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door to the apparatus and walked out. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Qin AI and the elders standing outside the door of the instrument, her face couldn't help but be filled with doubt. Hall Master, elders, what are you doing? Previously, when the disciples were taking the test, the palace master and the elders were standing at a relatively far place. Why were they suddenly here now? Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Qin AI and the elders' expressions froze for a moment. Soon after, they revealed somewhat embarrassed smiles. From the looks of it, Bailey Hongzhuang did not faint in the machine. Bailey Hongzhuang, did you just finish the test? The elder couldn't help but ask. He still couldn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang had stayed in the device for so long that it was hard to believe. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said matter-of-factly, yes. When the disciples saw Bailey Hongzhuang's reaction, they couldn't help but look at each other. Was Bailey Hongzhuang telling the truth? This must be fake, right? How could Bailey Hongzhuang have lasted for such a long time in the machine? Do you think it's possible that Bailey Hongzhuang fainted first, but soon woke up again, so she came out? After all, if she had really fainted in the machine, that would be an extremely embarrassing thing. She would never admit to it. What you've said makes sense. That's very likely the case. The disciples nodded and confirmed this guess. Chapter 22:13. Qin AI sized up Bailey Hongzhuang for a moment but did not say anything. He was also unable to fathom the situation in which Bailey Hongzhuang had entered the apparatus. Bailey Hongzhuang, who initially did not understand what had happened, suddenly understood after hearing the disciples' words. So, everyone had thought that she had fainted in the apparatus? The attacks in the apparatus were very concentrated and strong. It was not easy for her to deal with them. However, she had always kept Qin AI's words in mind, so she tried her best to hold on for as long as she could. After all, she was determined to win the quota for the competition of the 4 palaces. She could not just hand it over to someone else. Hence, she had given it her all in the apparatus. As long as she could hold on for a long enough time, she would be able to win the quota without any dispute. As for how long she had been in there, Bailey Hongzhuang was not sure either. She had placed all her attention on dealing with the attacks and did not notice the passing of time. Bailey Hongzhuang, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Qin AI thought for a moment and decided to ask. He knew the power of the apparatus very well. If Bailey Hongzhuang had really stayed in there for such a long time, the attacks and power she had to endure would be very terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head gently and smiled. "Thank you for your concern, Palace Master. I'm fine." Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's reply, everyone in the stone room had a strange expression on their faces. In the next moment, a clear and large word appeared on the apparatus. However, when the crowd saw the contents clearly, the disciples present could not help but gasp. Even Qin AI and the elder were surprised when they saw the two words written on it. They never thought that it would really end up like this. Heaven grade. It was a simple word, but it blinded the eyes of all the disciples present. Damn it, am I seeing things? Is that the heaven grade? Is it really the two words heaven grade? You're not seeing things. I saw those two words too. How long has it been since I've seen a cultivator who has reached the heaven grade? Isn't Bailey Hongzhuang an alchemist? Who can tell me why an alchemist can reach heaven stage? Don't stop me, I want some peace and quiet. The disciples didn't know what to say. This level proved that Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't fainted in the device. She had been holding on until now. Qin AI's eyes instantly lit up. He had long expected that Bailey Hongzhuang's powers would not be weak. However, he never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would actually be able to reach the heaven stage. This result was enough for Bailey Hongzhuang to get a place in the competition. Bailey Hongzhuang, you've given me a huge surprise. Qin AI did not hide his admiration and optimism. Previously, during the alchemist competition, Bailey Hongzhuang had already given him a surprise. He did not expect that this time, Bailey Hongzhuang would give him an even bigger surprise. Even in the four palaces, there weren't many cultivators who had reached the heaven grade. This time, perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to bring glory to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall in the competition of the four palaces. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Her smile was elegant and beautiful. "Palace Master, you flatter me." Qin AI and the Palace Master next to him looked at each other and a smile appeared in their eyes. Chapter 22:14. If their results in the competition of the four palaces were too poor, then as Palace Masters and Elders, they would also lose face. Although the four Palace Masters usually looked as if they did not care much, in fact, all of them hoped that their own disciples would be able to perform well in this competition of the four palaces. Bailey Hongzhuang could achieve such results. At least the strength of their Vermilion Bird Palace Hall had increased by a few points. The next moment, Qin AI's gaze fell on the other disciples in the stone room, and a majestic aura instantly broke out. Regarding Bailey Hongzhuang's results, no one can leak it out. Do you all understand? Bailey Hongzhuang had never shown her strength in cultivation since she entered Tiangang sect. In the eyes of the other disciples, Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation was a mystery. In that case, why not hide Bailey Hongzhuang's strength first? In this way, she could also become their Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's trump card. This disciple understands. As Qin AI's voice fell, the disciples nodded one after another. They all understood Qin AI's reason for doing so. Although in each palace hall, the disciples competed fiercely for the quota. However, when the battle of the four palaces truly began, they would belong to the same branch palace. Only when the disciples of the palace hall obtained a good ranking could they get more cultivation resources. Therefore, such a secret would never be leaked out. After receiving the disciples' answer, Qin AI nodded and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang, you go back first. When the assessment is completely over and the participants have been decided, I will send someone to inform you. At that time, I will tell the 20 participating disciples about the rules of the competition and what to pay attention to. Facing Bailey Hongzhuang, Qin AI's attitude was much gentler and more cordial. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang understood that the quota for the competition of the four palaces was already in her bag. After walking out of the stone room, Bailey Hongzhuang saw Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu still waiting for her outside the stone room. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang come out, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu immediately greeted her. "Hongzhuang, how are you? Did you get a spot?" Xia Jiqing quickly asked. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. I've already gotten a spot. As soon as these words came out, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu's faces both showed a smile. That's great. I knew that with your strength, you would definitely be able to get a spot. By the way, Hong Zhuang, what happened in the stone room just now? We only heard a series of gasps as if something terrible had happened. Xia Jiqing's face was full of curiosity. Not only them, but the disciples outside the stone room were also very curious. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't go in to take a look, many disciples would have already gone in to check it out. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and said, actually, nothing much happened. It's just that some of the disciples were of a higher level, so everyone was very surprised. Since Qin AI told everyone not to spread this news, then he must have his reasons. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not mention it. Then what do we do now? Go back? Bai Junyu asked. Previously he and Xia Jiqing had already been tested, but with the strength of the two of them, there was still a certain distance to get a spot. Chapter 22:15. There's nothing else, let's go back. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips were slightly raised, her smile was clear and charming. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang listened to Xia Jiqing talk about a lot of things that had happened recently. They often contacted Gong Shaoqing and the others, and now Lu Qinyue often gathered with them. Although Lu Qinyue had not been in the alchemy hall for a long time, with her strength and beauty, she was very popular in the alchemy hall. Similarly, Gong Shaoqing and Lu Qinyue's relationship also had some progress, and there were even disciples who challenged Gong Shaoqing for Lu Qinyue. Bailey Hongzhuang did not know about these things before, but now she found it very interesting. After Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the house to rest for about 2 hours, a disciple came to find her, saying that the hall master had informed her to go to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang came to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall under the guidance of a disciple. This was the first time she came to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. This was naturally smaller than the Tiangang Sex Hall, but it was red all over and looked very eye-catching. When Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, there were already many disciples gathered in the hall. Among them, Qin AI was sitting on the main seat, looking at the disciples present with a smile. After Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, the eyes of some disciples fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Suddenly, many disciples frowned. When the other disciples were looking at Bailey Hongzhuang was also looking at the other disciples. With this look, Bailey Hongzhuang found that there were no familiar faces among the 20 disciples. Obviously, these disciples were the old disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, and it was extremely difficult for the new disciples to compete with the old disciples for this quota. After all, the old disciples' cultivation time was much longer than the new disciples, and their strength was naturally not comparable to the new disciples. Bailey Hongzhuang also got a quota? She is the only one among the new disciples. Could it be that she got the quota by relying on the young sect master? What's impossible about that? We don't have Bailey Hongzhuang's ability, so we can only rely on ourselves. The competition of the 4 palaces this time concerns the honor of our Vermilion Bird Palace Hall as well as the allocation of cultivation resources for our disciples. If we allow Bailey Hongzhuang to participate, wouldn't that be equivalent to us losing a spot for no reason? In this kind of matter, young sect master and palace master are actually so biased, it's simply too disappointing. A group of old disciples looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a bit of dissatisfaction. They were all disciples who cultivated blindly in order to make themselves strong enough to be outstanding. To them, Bailey Hongzhuang was someone who got in through the back door, so they were unhappy from the bottom of their hearts. As for Bailey Hongzhuang's performance in the alchemist competition, what did that have to do with cultivation? Since her pill refining skills were so good, then she should stay in the cultivation palace and not harm others here. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the unkind gazes from the surrounding disciples, but she didn't mind it too much. Anyway, tomorrow was the start of the competition of the 4 palaces and their true abilities would be revealed on the tournament stage. Since everyone is here, then let me introduce the rules of tomorrow's competition. Qin AI's voice slowly rang out. Chapter 22:16. The battle of the 4 palaces is divided into the preliminary round and the final round. The preliminary round uses the elimination system. 20 disciples from each side palace will take part in the battle of the 4 palaces. A total of 80 disciples will take part. There is no room for redemption in the preliminary round. Once you fail, you will lose the right to continue. In the first preliminary round, 40 out of 80 will remain. In the second preliminary round, 20 out of 40 will remain. In the third preliminary round, 10 out of 20 will remain. After the preliminary round, the remaining 10 disciples will enter the final round. The first round of the final round will be the same as the preliminary round. Out of 10 disciples, only 5 will remain. The last 5 disciples will take turns to fight, and the disciple with the most wins will win the first place. Following Qin Ai's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest instantly understood. The rules were simple and easy to understand. They only needed to win 3 rounds in a row to enter the final round. As for the martial arts championship, every sect will have 10 places and the young sect master will participate as well. Hence, the disciples who have been eliminated in the first round of the final round will participate in the ranking round again to determine the places for the martial arts championship. Basically, as long as you enter the final round, you will more or less win a place for the martial arts championship. Qin Ai's face was filled with a faint smile. He knew that the disciples were very concerned about the martial arts championship. If he did not make this clear to everyone, they would be very anxious. Rather than that, he might as well make it clear to them. This way, everyone would be able to pay more attention to every round. Once they lost, they would miss the opportunity to enter the martial arts championship. Sure enough, when everyone heard this, their eyes immediately lit up. They only needed to do their best to win 3 rounds in a row and they would more or less win a place for the martial arts championship. Qin Ai noticed the joy on everyone's faces and began to wake them up. It looks like you only need to win 3 rounds in a row to win a place, but winning every round is not an easy task. The disciples who are taking part in the battle of the 4 palaces are the most outstanding disciples from each side palace and their powers are definitely not weak. Hence, you must not harbor any feelings of love rivals. There was not much difference in the powers of the 4 palaces. Every battle of the 4 palaces was a fierce battle and the results would not be known until the end. It may seem easy to win 3 rounds in a row, but luck played a role in this as well. If you met a strong opponent as soon as you entered the arena, then you could only say that you were unlucky and were eliminated as soon as you entered the arena. However, other than the trump cards of the various branch palaces, the strength of the majority of the disciples was not too different. Therefore, the element of luck would be slightly better. Disciple will keep that in mind. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others replied with a salute. Bailey Hongzhuang thought to herself. The process of this competition was not complicated, but it was clear that winning each round was not an easy task. She didn't know much about the strength of the Tiangang sect's disciples. Similarly, she didn't know what level she was at. According to the situation of her cultivation with Bewitching during this period of time, presumably her strength should not be too bad in Tiangang sect. These disciples were all older than her and had cultivated for a longer time than her. Moreover, she was not the only one who had obtained first place in the assessment competition. Chapter 22:17. In addition, I have one more thing to remind everyone. When your opponent's strength is not enough to display all your means, you can look at the situation and hide your strength. Once all your cards are exposed in the early stage, it is very likely that you will be targeted. Qin Ai had been the palace master of Tiangang sect for so many years, so she was very clear about this situation. Once targeted, it would be even more difficult to win. The disciples nodded and remembered Qin Ai's words in their hearts. Because the participants of the competition of the 4 palaces were all very famous disciples of the 4 palaces, this competition of the 4 palaces would go on for several days. Every time the competition of the 4 palaces was held, it was a big event for Tiangang sect. All the disciples would temporarily put aside their cultivation and other matters to watch the competition of the 4 palaces. After all, even if they couldn't participate, watching the battle of the powerful disciples could also make them gain some benefits. Therefore, each disciple would only participate in 1 battle a day. This was also to allow the disciples to recover their fighting strength better, so that they could break out their true strength on the martial arts stage. Speaking of which, only the first day had the most battles. The number of battles would decrease every day, but there would be more and more disciples watching. After Qin Ai told everyone the things they needed to pay attention to, everyone left the meeting hall. Tomorrow was the day when the competition of the 4 palaces would begin. Everyone had to go back and prepare well for tomorrow's battle. The next day, Bailey Hongzhuang got up early. Because today was the 80th elimination round, there would be a total of 40 battles, so the competition of the 4 palaces would start very early. As for whether these 40 battles would be divided into 1 day or 2 days, this would depend on the situation. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the house, she found that there were many disciples outside the house who were setting off for the competition venue. It was the first time that Bailey Hongzhuang had seen such a lively scene. "Hongzhuang, if you are ready, let's go together." Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile. They were not qualified to compete, so today's main purpose was to watch Bailey Hongzhuang compete. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. As a disciple who was going to participate in the competition today, he definitely couldn't be late. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 had already set off very early. However, when they arrived at the competition venue, they discovered that there was already a sea of people in the vicinity. As far as the eye could see, there was only a sea of black heads moving about. It was impossible to tell who was who. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at the surrounding area that could hold tens of thousands of spectators, and she understood that this place must have been specially prepared for the battle of the 4 palaces. In Tiangang sect, perhaps only the competition between the 4 halls could attract so many people. Not only the disciples, but the palace masters and elders had also arrived early. The 4 hall masters and the hall master of the alchemy hall had already sat down on the high platform. As they looked at the lively scene, they all smiled. In the middle of the 5 palace masters, there was an empty seat, which was obviously reserved for Bewitching. After Bailey Hongzhuang looked around, she greeted Xia Jiqing and the other 2 and went to the area where the participating disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall were located. Chapter 22:18. After all, if the participating disciples did not stay in one place to wait for the battle, it would not be easy for that person to walk up to the tournament stage from the crowd when the call came. The disciples from the 4 side palaces stood in 4 different areas and were not too far apart. At this moment, they were full of energy and looked around in high spirits. Today was the stage for them to perform. As outstanding cultivators, they were very willing to let everyone know how powerful they were. By the time Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, more than half of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's participating disciples had already arrived. She stopped at the back of the crowd. As soon as she appeared, Bailey Hongzhuang could feel a lot of disdainful gazes falling on her. Yesterday, ever since they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang would be taking part in the Battle of the 4 Palaces, the participating disciples had gone back to ask about the results of the test that Bailey Hongzhuang had entered the apparatus. However, all the disciples who were asked shook their heads as if they could not say anything. Most importantly, the palace lord had instructed them not to say anything. After finding out the answer, the participating disciples understood the answer even more clearly. They did not need to think to know that Bailey Hongzhuang's powers had not reached the standard to take part in the Battle of the 4 Palaces. It was only because of her status as the young sect master that Bailey Hongzhuang had been given a place. In order to cause an even bigger commotion, the palace lord had ordered all the disciples to keep their mouths shut. But so what if they had kept their mouths shut? One would only need to think carefully to know the answer. Hence, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's participating disciples looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with even more unfriendly gazes. They had relied on their own hard work to get to where they were today. Bailey Hongzhuang had only relied on one layer of relationship to obtain all of this so easily. Some of the disciples could not help but wonder if Bailey Hongzhuang would use this layer of relationship to directly obtain a place in the Battle of the Deer. If that was really the case, it would be too unfair to them. This Bailey Hongzhuang really likes to be in the limelight. Since she's an alchemist, she should just be an alchemist obediently. Why must she come here to join in the fun? I don't believe that young sect master will still give her a place in the battle for the throne if she can't enter the finals. That's right. If that's the case, even the young sect master won't be able to escape the gossip. The disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with displeasure. The other disciples in the group were all powerful people and they knew each other well. Only this Bailey Hongzhuang was nothing. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard the discussion of the disciples. It seemed that everyone had a lot of opinions about her. Master, these fellows' words are too harsh. I'll go scold them. Xiao He had always been hot-tempered. She could not hold back at all when faced with such a situation. Before Bailey Hongzhuang could stop her, Xiao He's angry voice rang out. What are you guys talking about? You don't know anything. If you don't have the power, just say it. Why are you still pretending to be all high and mighty? What other abilities do you have apart from belittling others? Xiao He placed her hands on her hips and stood on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. She looked as if she could hold back 10,000 men and compete to see who could scold the other more. The disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall had originally wanted to ridicule Bailey Hongzhuang. No one had expected that Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast would actually start scolding her. Chapter 22:19. If Bailey Hongzhuang knew what these disciples were thinking, she too would not be able to resist ridiculing them. Yesterday she was just too lazy to bother about it, not that she didn't dare to bother about it. To her, the amount of criticism she had suffered along the way was just too much and she had long stopped caring about what others thought. After all, people lived for themselves and she couldn't be bothered about what others thought. But when Xiao He said that, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples' gazes all fell onto Bailey Hongzhuang. From their point of view, they didn't think that it was Xiao He who had scolded them. It must be Bailey Hongzhuang who had instigated her contracted beast to stand out and scold them. This move was truly despicable enough. What we've said is the truth. If you hadn't relied on your relationship with the young sect master, how could you possibly obtain the quota to take part in the competition of the 4 palaces? Tan Yuehan's face was filled with displeasure and anger. As a lady, she had put in a huge amount of effort to obtain her current position in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, which was filled with talents. Originally, she was the limelight in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. But ever since Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, everyone's attention had shifted onto Bailey Hongzhuang. On one hand, it was because Bailey Hongzhuang could possibly be the future young sect master's wife. On the other hand, it was because of Bailey Hongzhuang's outstanding looks. However, this Bailey Hongzhuang obviously didn't have a body constitution that attracted people's affection. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang's background and looks weren't bad, but she was still the target of suspicion in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. However, ever since the alchemist competition had ended, the situation had changed and many disciples had changed their views towards Bailey Hongzhuang. She was originally feeling displeased, but Bailey Hongzhuang was only an alchemist and didn't have much interaction with her, so she didn't mind. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had now taken part in the competition of the 4 palaces, so naturally she felt extremely displeased when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang. You idiot! My master got it with his own ability, and I'll say that you got it by relying on some messy connections. Xiao He was an expert at stirring up trouble. It did not care what other people said. Anyway, it did not know what they were talking about. All it needed to do was to slander them. Everything was that simple. You're talking nonsense? Tan Lihan was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. It was obvious that Xiao He was furious. You're the one who's talking nonsense. Your whole family is full of nonsense. Xiao He hopped on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. She was best at talking. Even if a few more people were to scold her, she would not be afraid at all. Xiao Bai was also good at fighting, but now that it saw that Xiao He was able to completely stun this guy, there was no need for it to step forward and show off its strength. Bailey Hongzhuang had never been afraid of shedding all pretense of cordiality. Usually, she couldn't be bothered to say it because she couldn't be bothered. However, when this kind of thing really happened, she didn't care in the slightest. Since so many people in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall were not convinced, then she would make them completely convinced. There was only one way to do it: beat them up. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't go overboard. Tan Lihan stared angrily at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her voice had not been the loudest, but she never thought that after Xiao He had spoken, she would be the only one to speak. Chapter 2220. The Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's participating disciples were all looking at the conflict between Tan Lihan and Bailey Hongzhuang with great interest. Previously, when everyone was verbally attacking Bailey Hongzhuang, they naturally didn't mind joining in. However, since Bailey Hongzhuang had started to retaliate, no matter what, they still had to take into account the young sect master's identity. Even if they felt disdain towards Bailey Hongzhuang for breaking the rules to obtain such a quota, but the young sect master's identity was there. If they were to directly clash with Bailey Hongzhuang now, wouldn't that mean that they were dissatisfied with the young sect master and palace master Qin's decision? The bird that sticks out gets shot, so they would never do something that was disadvantageous to themselves. However, for a hothead like Tan Lihan to be willing to directly clash with Bailey Hongzhuang, they were happy to see that. Seeing that Tan Lihan had taken the initiative to provoke her, Bailey Hongzhuang lightly turned around and her cold and distant gaze sized up Tan Lihan for a moment. Her red lips parted slightly and her voice was cold. Tan Lihan, from the beginning to the end, it was you who was attacking me and I didn't say a single word. Now you're asking me not to go overboard? Bailey Hongzhuang's expression became increasingly cold and her eyes were as cold as ice. I think you're the one who shouldn't go overboard. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Tan Lihan's expression froze. From the looks of it, the matter indeed seemed to be as such. That's not right. Tan Lihan wasn't intimidated by Bailey Hongzhuang's words as she continued, doesn't your contracted beast's words represent your own words? That's what you think, not what I said. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was indifferent and her state was elegant. She didn't seem to care about Tan Lihan's words at all. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's indifferent look, Tan Lihan felt even more displeased. It was obvious that Bailey Hongzhuang was the one who had no ability. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang was standing at the top to criticize her. This was too funny. Bailey Hongzhuang, I didn't expect you to be so good at quibbling. This must be how you got your ability to get in through the back door, right? You obviously don't have the strength, yet you still took up a spot. You are really shameless. Tan Lihan originally had some scruples about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, but now that she was angry, she couldn't care less. As soon as these words came out, the disciples present all looked at each other in dismay. It seemed that the conflict between Tan Lihan and Bailey Hongzhuang was about to escalate. No matter how calm Bailey Hongzhuang was, in the face of Tan Lihan's accusation, she would definitely lose face. Just when everyone thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to go crazy, Bailey Hongzhuang sneered and her lips curled into a mocking smile. Even if I got in through the back door, what has that got to do with you? If you have the ability, you can get in through the back door. If you don't have the ability, then shut your mouth. Besides, against a pig-like opponent like you, Bailey Hongzhuang disdained to get in through the back door. After Bailey Hongzhuang's words came out, she couldn't even be bothered to look at Tan Lihan. That look was filled with disdain towards Tan Lihan and even looking at her was a waste of time. Tan Lihan was stunned. The disciples present were all stunned. Was Bailey Hongzhuang admitting that she had gotten in through the back door? But just as Bailey Hongzhuang had said, towards Bailey Hongzhuang being able to get in through the back door, most of the disciples were envious and jealous. Who asked them to not be able to do it? Chapter 2221. Through the back door? She really did not have that ability. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had actually said that she was a pig-like opponent. Bailey Hongzhuang was only a new disciple, and a new disciple who had spent all her energy on refining pills. Now, she had actually said that she was a pig-like opponent? Tan Lihan only felt a surge of anger in her chest, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Based on her, Tan Lihan's ranking in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, who would dare to say that she was a pig-like opponent? Just as Tan Lihan was about to rebut Bailey Hongzhuang, a low and cold voice rang out. Tan Lihan, since you are already well aware of it, why continue to fuss over it? Hearing this voice, Tan Lihan was slightly taken aback. She immediately looked towards the man who had spoken, and her face instantly turned red as she nodded. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked towards the man who had spoken. The man was handsome, and his posture was steady and cold. His coldness was different from Gong Shaoqing's indifference. His coldness was more like a form of contempt. He despised everyone around him, so he was very cold. Because these people were unable to receive any of his attention. Shen Xiuhan, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's #1 disciple, was a cultivation maniac. Usually, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples rarely saw Shen Xiuhan. Even if it was the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's internal competitions, Shen Xiuhan would not even bother to participate. However, even though Shen Xiuhan rarely appeared, his position as #1 was still extremely stable. He had a very high reputation in the hearts of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples. The existence of the most powerful cultivator had always attracted attention. Shen Xiuhan glanced coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. It was just a glance, but Bailey Hongzhuang could clearly see that it was full of disdain. It was as if Bailey Hongzhuang, a person who had walked through the back door without any real talent, was beneath his notice. Compared to Tan Lihan's provocation, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that Shen Xiuhan's disdain was even more unpleasant. Who did this guy think he was? How dare he look at her with such a gaze? Fuck, this guy really knows how to act cool. When Xiao He saw Shen Xiuhan, she couldn't help but curse. It wasn't that she had never seen a pretentious person, but she had never seen such a pretentious person. Even young masters like Di Beichen, Wen Ziren, and even Mo Yunjue wouldn't dare to look at master with such a gaze. Who the hell did this guy think he was? As the #1 expert of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, if he doesn't show off, how can he show off how extraordinary he is? However, I'm curious if he can still maintain his arrogance and disdain when he's beaten to the ground. Xiao Bai sneered. Acting tough will get you struck by lightning. Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and Little White Lion were beasts who loved to show off. Now that there was someone who could show off better than them, they were very displeased. They should be the ones in charge of being in the limelight and having their own halo. The voices of the three beasts were not soft, and in an instant, all the participating disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall heard them clearly. Instantly, everyone's expressions became interesting. Shen Xiuhan's expression stiffened, and his expert demeanor was almost broken. Where had Bailey Hongzhuang found such a top-grade contracted beast? He, Shen Xiuhan, had always shown such an attitude after coming to Tiangang's sect. Who dared to criticize him? Chapter 22-22. Even though his anger had reached its peak, Shen Xiuhan still managed to hold back his anger. As the #1 disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, if he were to argue with Bailey Hongzhuang like this, it would be a loss of grace. If word got out, it would be extremely disadvantageous to him. After all, he rarely argued with others on a daily basis. There was only one way for him to argue, and that was to teach the other party a lesson. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had not said anything. The ones who had spoken were Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beasts. If word of this got out, he would undoubtedly lose all face. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang could say that this matter had nothing to do with him. However, if he were to argue in secret, he would be too petty. Furthermore, teaching Bailey Hongzhuang a lesson was not urgent. After the Battle of the Four Palaces had begun, he would use his own power to make Bailey Hongzhuang understand that he was not acting pretentious. When the cultivators of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall saw that Shen Xiuhan had maintained his silence, their expressions became a little more interesting. It must be said that Shen Xiuhan's usual arrogant and cold style was not the least bit approachable. Many of the disciples were unhappy, but because of Shen Xiuhan's power, they could only swallow their anger. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang's three contracted beasts had directly exposed Shen Xiuhan's pretense, they felt extremely delighted. It must be said that they enjoyed a clash between cultivators of such status very much. Tan Lihan glared angrily at Bailey Hongzhuang, her bright eyes filled with anger and hatred. She had always admired Shen Xiuhan. From her point of view, Shen Xiuhan was her future man. Usually, she worshipped Shen Xiuhan the most. Shen Xiuhan was her sky. As a female disciple, Shen Xiuhan was the main reason why she had been able to cultivate to her current level of power. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang's mockery of her, she was even more dissatisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang's insults towards Shen Xiuhan. No one had ever dared to say such things about Shen Xiuhan. The male god in her heart would not allow anyone to slander him. Tan Lihan had already remembered this grudge in her heart. The battle between the four palaces was about to begin. No matter how arrogant Bailey Hongzhuang was, she would not be able to stay arrogant for long. On the contrary, Shen Xiuhan was the main character of this battle. What she hoped for the most now was to be able to meet Bailey Hongzhuang on the tournament stage. However, in the competition between the four palaces, disciples from different palaces would face off against disciples from different palaces. She was afraid that she would not have much of a chance. With Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, it was impossible for her to enter the finals. For Bailey Hongzhuang, this incident was just an interlude. Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang turned her attention to the stage. Under everyone's amazed and admiring gazes, a faint golden figure slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight. The five palace masters hurriedly stood up and bowed deeply to the handsome man who was slowly walking over. The man looked as if he had walked over under the sun, like the stars surrounding the moon, noble and elegant, unparalleled. In a split second, all the brilliance seemed to be enveloped by Bewitching. Everyone's eyes were fixed on this figure. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a smile. Bewitching was such a breathtaking existence. No matter where he was, he would always be the focus of attention. Chapter 22-23. Just one smile, that moment of youth. Even in such a crowd, they could still see each other at a glance. Bewitching slowly sat down and waved his hand slightly. The crowd of disciples then stood up straight, full of vigor and anticipation. Quite a number of disciples had noticed Bewitching's smile towards Bailey Hongzhuang, and they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. The young sect master's feelings towards Bailey Hongzhuang were indeed not ordinary. Tan Lihan glared hatefully at Bailey Hongzhuang, her heart feeling extremely indignant. She just couldn't stand looking at Bailey Hongzhuang. Apart from her outstanding looks and bewitching looks, everything else about this woman was just average. However, the young sect master's honorable presence was actually so affectionate towards Bailey Hongzhuang. It was really hard to imagine. In terms of looks, she felt that her looks weren't too bad either. In comparison, she had liked Shen Xiuhan for a very long time, but he had never expressed his feelings towards her. Although her power couldn't be compared to Shen Xiuhan's, it wasn't too bad. The gap between the two of them wasn't that huge, but she could always feel that Shen Xiuhan cared about her. However, the gap between Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master was simply a chasm that was difficult to cross. Even so, the young sect master had still acknowledged Bailey Hongzhuang's existence in front of everyone. The gap between the two of them was just too big. While Tan Lihan was glaring hatefully at Bailey Hongzhuang didn't pay any attention to Tan Lihan. However, she could still feel her gaze. It looked like Tan Lihan really hated her this time. But even so what? Since the young sect master is here, let's begin the competition between the four palaces, shall we? Qin Ai's face was filled with a warm and benevolent smile as he asked Bewitching respectfully. Bewitching nodded slightly and said, "Since everyone is here, let's begin." After receiving Bewitching's approval, the palace masters and elders were all smiles. Bewitching immediately stood up and looked at the dense crowd of disciples below the high platform. His voice was magnetic and loud. The Battle of the Four Halls has always been a tradition of the Tiangang sect. The ranking of the Battle of the Four Halls is also related to the distribution of resources in the following period of time. Presumably, everyone was paying close attention to this competition between the four palaces and had been looking forward to it for a long time. At the same time, everyone should know that this Battle of the Four Palaces will affect the Battle of Zhuelu in 3 months' time. Once one participates in the Battle of Zhuelu, as long as one performs well in the Battle of Zhuelu, one's name will truly spread throughout the world. Therefore, in this competition between the four palaces, I hope that everyone will be able to bring out their true strength. As Bewitching's voice fell, the eyes of all the disciples present lit up, especially those participating in the competition. This was a crucial moment for their future. Speaking of which, the disciples who were participating in the Battle of the Four Palaces felt that they were exceptionally lucky. Coincidentally, The Battle of the Four Palaces was related to the quota for the Battle of Zhuolu. If it had been any other time, they wouldn't have had such an opportunity. I believe that everyone is ready. Then I hereby announce that the Battle of the Four Palaces has officially begun. In a split second, the atmosphere in the entire battle arena changed. All the disciples looked at the stage with great anticipation. The exciting competition would begin here. Chapter 22-24. Under everyone's gaze, Qiao Yingzi slowly stood up. The Great Elder had completely disappeared from Tiangang sect. Therefore, Qiao Yingzi, who was originally the second elder, was now the Great Elder of Tiangang sect. The preliminary round uses the method of drawing lots. Disciples who draw the same number will compete with each other. The order of the competition will be determined according to this number. Number 1 is the disciple in the first round of the competition. Number 40 is the disciple in the last round of the competition. Does everyone understand? In the process of this competition, only drawing lots was the fairest method. Disciples understand. The participating disciples of the 4 major branch halls responded one after another. Now, the participating disciples can come up to the stage to draw lots. Listening to Qiao Yingzi's words, the disciples of the 4 major branch halls walked up to the high platform one after another. This drawing lots was also an opportunity for them to show their abilities. When every disciple walked up to the high platform, there would be a burst of discussion below the high platform. As the existence of the top 20 of each branch hall of Tiangang sect, they had always been known by everyone. The participating disciples were even more arrogant. They were already the existence of powerhouses to be able to obtain a place in this competition. Bailey Hongzhuang also walked up to the high platform. After drawing her lot, she walked back to her original position. When Bailey Hongzhuang walked back to the preparation position of the participating disciples, she found that everyone's position was according to the order of the competition. In this way, they could also see who their next opponent was. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. Everything was really simple and clear. Bailey Hongzhuang was number 27. Her appearance was a little late, so her position was also a little further back. Her opponent was a male disciple of the Azure Dragon Hall. However, she didn't know much about the Azure Dragon Hall and didn't know how strong her opponent was. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the male disciple's gaze also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. The moment he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, the male disciple was obviously stunned for a moment. After he reacted, he revealed a smile. Bailey Hongzhuang also responded with a smile. Tan Lihan and Shen Xiuhan's rankings were relatively high. Tan Lihan was in the 7th round, while Shen Xiuhan was in the 15th round. Coincidentally, she could also understand their strength through their competition. After drawing lots, the first round of the competition began. There was only one huge battling platform in this huge martial arts arena. The scale was extremely vast. After the referee elder introduced the names of the 2 disciples and the sub-palaces they came from, the competition officially began. This battle was just as Bailey Hongzhuang had expected. The strength of each disciple selected from the sub-palace was not weak. On this martial arts stage, they even used all their skills. Their combat strength was very astonishing. Therefore, they were in a stalemate when they exchanged blows. Both sides were in a deadlock, and no one could do anything to the other for a while. However, one couldn't help but admit that the strength of these disciples was really outstanding. The collision of their martial skills and battle experience would often cause the disciples in the spectators' stand to cry out in surprise. Through watching this competition, they understood the difference in strength between themselves and the disciples on the ranking board. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was watching the competition, a voice rang out beside Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 22-25. Hearing this unfamiliar voice, Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. She had never met this Yi Chenyu before. However, since the other party took the initiative to express goodwill, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't mind making another friend. Of course, the premise was that the other party didn't have any other thoughts. So it's senior brother Yi. Sorry for the disrespect. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled lightly. Junior sister Bailey doesn't spend much time in the palace. I presume you don't know much about your opponents. I've always liked to collect information, especially about the participating disciples. I have some understanding of their strength. Why don't I introduce them to junior sister Bailey? Yi Chenyu was obviously a friendly person. After seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't reject him, he immediately began to introduce. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She indeed didn't know anything about the participating disciples. This was a bit disadvantageous. If someone could introduce her, she would naturally be very happy. Then I'll have to trouble senior brother Yi. Your opponent is Lu Xingyang of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. I can say that junior sister Bailey's luck is very good. Yi Chenyu smiled lightly. He believed that there were many people who were envious of Bailey Hongzhuang's good luck. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. She had more or less understood Yi Chenyu's meaning. This Lu Xingyang is at the bottom of the participating disciples of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. If there are no accidents, he will definitely be eliminated in the first round. He is 21 this year and has been in the Tiangang sect for 2 years. His current cultivation is between Green Realm Level 9 and Green Realm Level 1. As far as I know, he was still Green Realm Level 9 before. However, I feel that in order to have a good performance in the competition between the 4 palaces, he must have tried his best to break through to Green Realm Level 1. The last 40 disciples participating in the competition between the 4 palaces have about the same cultivation. However, everyone's fighting strength is different. However, the first place of the 4 palaces is much stronger. Yi Chenyu earnestly explained the situation to Bailey Hongzhuang. The participating disciples of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall didn't know of Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, but he did. This was because when Bailey Hongzhuang was taking the test yesterday, he was also in the stone room and personally saw Bailey Hongzhuang's heaven stage. Even in the entire Tiangang sect, how many disciples of this level could appear? Therefore, he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was not weak. By the time Bailey Hongzhuang stood on the martial arts stage and began to compete, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples would probably be stunned. He had already admired Bailey Hongzhuang very much during the alchemist competition. In addition, Bailey Hongzhuang was a cultivator who had been evaluated as a heaven stage cultivator, which made him admire her even more. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang was very amiable and approachable. He was very happy to have the opportunity to be friends with Bailey Hongzhuang. After Bailey Hongzhuang understood LV Xingyang's strength, she understood in her heart. She didn't expect that her luck in randomly drawing lots would be so good. This way, she could still hide a certain amount of her strength in the first round of the preliminary competition. I didn't expect senior brother Yi to understand the situation of these disciples so well. I really admire you. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't pay much attention to Yi Chenyu's words. After all, as long as one stayed in Tiangang sect long enough, it was normal to have some understanding of some disciples. Chapter 22-26. Junior Sister Bailey is too polite. With Junior Sister's ability, it's easy for you to obtain this information. It's just that Junior Sister is busy and doesn't know much about it. In fact, most of the disciples participating today have some understanding of their opponents. In this way, we can reduce the possibility of being at a disadvantage when we fight. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. She knew that Yi Chenyu was telling the truth. The battle of the 4 palaces this time was related to many things. Every disciple was thinking of ways to make full preparations. It wasn't difficult to obtain information. As long as they walked around a few palaces and spent some resources to inquire, they would definitely be able to obtain the information they wanted. However, none of the disciples were fools. Thus, they would hide some of their strength. However, the gap wouldn't be too big. Bailey Hongzhuang had previously spent all her time on raising her cultivation and didn't have the time to pay attention to these things. She never thought that Yi Chenyu would tell her about these things. Senior brother Ye's information is very helpful to me. However, I still want to know some information from senior brother. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. Yi Chenyu smiled. Junior Sister Bailey, if you have any questions, just tell me. I will tell you everything I know. To him, most of this information was known to everyone. If he could make Bailey Hongzhuang think highly of him, he would be extremely happy. Of course, the information he gathered was more specific than what the ordinary disciples gathered. I wonder if senior brother Yi can introduce me to the strongest of the four palaces? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Yi Chenyu. She didn't pay much attention to the strength of the ordinary disciples. However, the strongest of the four palaces were definitely extremely powerful. Once they entered the finals, they would definitely encounter each other. She had to understand more. Originally, she planned to wait until the end of today's competition to find out more. However, since there was Yi Chenyu, who was extremely knowledgeable, she naturally wouldn't go too far. This is naturally not a problem. Yi Chenyu smiled. The strongest of the Azure Dragon Hall is called Xiao Feilin. He's 23 years old and has been famous in the Azure Dragon Hall for a long time. When he first entered the Tiangang sect, he was already very powerful and deeply praised by the Azure Dragon Hall master. Under the nurturing of the Tiangang sect's resources, his potential completely exploded, and the speed at which his strength increased was extremely shocking. For the past year, he had been in seclusion and could be called a cultivation maniac. He had never fought with anyone, so it was difficult to judge his strength. However, it is said that before he went into seclusion, his cultivation had already reached Green Realm level 9. At the mention of Xiao Feilin, Yi Chenyu couldn't help but sigh. The strength of such an expert was simply too shocking. Even if the cultivators behind him tried their best to catch up, they were still too far away. Bailey Hongzhuang secretly exclaimed in her heart. Sure enough, the first rankers of this branch hall were all extremely terrifying existences. Their talent and strength were both astonishing. The strongest person in the White Tiger Hall is called Xiao Feiyu. She and the Azure Dragon Hall's Xiao Feilin are blood siblings. Both of their talents are extremely shocking. However, these two people had always regarded each other as opponents and wanted to defeat each other. Therefore, when they first entered Tiangang sect, they chose different branches. Chapter 22-27. After learning that Xiao Feilin and Xiao Feiyu were actually a pair of siblings, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. The genes of this pair of siblings were truly amazing. Our Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's #1 expert is Shen Xiuhan. He's 24 years old and very few people are able to communicate with him. Shen Xiuhan can be said to be the most difficult person to approach among the experts of the four palaces, but his strength is also admirable. In this year, Shen Xiuhan is the same as Xiao Feilin, always in a state of seclusion and rarely appears in front of everyone. It could be assumed that the experts of the four palaces had already known about the Battle of Zhuolu. Therefore, they had put all their efforts into improving their cultivation in order to perform well in the Battle of the Four Palaces. The strength of the experts of the four palaces is not too different, so the ranking has always been controversial and has never been confirmed. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Shen Xiuhan indifferently. Although Shen Xiuhan was arrogant and disdainful, she had to admit that he did have his own abilities. The #1 expert of the Black Martial Hall is Yan Bin. Like his name, he is straightforward and can be said to have a violent temper. Moreover, Yan Bin is famous for being a battle maniac. As long as there is a disagreement, he will start a fight. Thinking back, the Black Martial Hall master also felt very helpless towards Yan Bin, but because Yan Bin is indeed a cultivation genius and has now become the #1 expert of the Black Martial Hall, the previous problems naturally disappeared. Under Yi Chenyu's reminder, Bailey Hongzhuang sized up the appearances of the four great experts. Xiao Feilin and Xiao Feiyu were indeed brother and sister. Their appearances were very similar, but after looking at them for a while, she felt that Xiao Feilin was more feminine and Xiao Feiyu was more masculine. As expected, the extremely similar faces were of completely different genders. After looking at them for a long time, it was quite magical. Needless to say, Shen Xiuhan was cold and arrogant, looking down from above, with a bit of the demeanor of an expert. Yan Bin was like his name. Just by looking at his appearance, one could tell that he was not someone to be trifled with. However, his appearance was very outstanding, just like a sunny and handsome man. However, any disciple who had some understanding of Yan Bin knew that all this was just on the surface. If anyone provoked him, it would be really troublesome. Even Shin Xiuhan and the others were not willing to have any conflicts with Yan Bin. When the disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall saw that Yi Chenyu had taken the initiative to curry favor with Bailey Hongzhuang, they were somewhat astonished. Yi Chenyu's ranking in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was also not bad. His strength was also very high. Furthermore, Yi Chenyu had another ability, which was that he was extremely good at gathering information. In fact, although everyone was very unhappy that Bailey Hongzhuang had obtained this quota through the back door, there were still many disciples who wanted to curry favor with Bailey Hongzhuang because of her identity. Therefore, when Tan Lihan and Bailey Hongzhuang clashed, no one helped Tan Lihan. However, no one expected that Yi Chenyu would take the initiative to befriend Bailey Hongzhuang. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang also recognized Yi Chenyu as a friend. Yi Chenyu's actions were really fast. When Shin Xiuhan saw that Yi Chenyu and Bailey Hongzhuang were chatting happily, he could not help but furrow his brows. However, he quickly returned to his usual appearance. In the process of this conversation, the competition continued. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.